Welcome into the second ever episode of F1 Formula One on the Betting the Pitch Podcast Network. I'm your host, real_G Warner, joined as I am on all F1 episodes ever, and hopefully all F1 episodes forever. I'm joined by Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter, ROSCOE Poop Scoop. I've said that now more times than I ever expected on two consecutive episodes. Angel, how are you doing? I'm so glad to have you back, and please tell me, besides, I guess, your off-season activities and your Twitter account understandings, if you'd like to get more of an explanation on that, feel free to look and listen back to our Australian Grand Prix episode. But Angel, tell us what you've seen so far in F1 this season. This is our third race. Am I getting that right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's been interesting so far. I think if we recall what we discussed on the Australian Grand Prix, right? Like it's a rat race. It's gonna anything could be the case. Anyone has a shot. Granted, Lando won the race as he was favored. But honestly, Max and the Oscar Piastri both had a really strong point of time like winning the race, right? If you watch the whole race. But I think just zoom out a little bit, looking at the both race, the key point that's kind of proven so far, McLaren has about best car on the track, right?
So we will get into
The
that as I do have and for this Japan Grand Prix. I do have episodes, or I do have lines to discuss based on the team that's most likely to win the race. So that certainly is reflected. McLaren being minus 250 to the next closest challenger, the Red Bull team, at plus 450, a gap of about 53% in implied win probability. So pretty significant there. But certainly, so we'll start with the Australian Grand Prix, and then you can fill me in because I guess, I mean, with college basketball, I will fully admit I have not barely slept in a long time. I feel like allergy season hit at the same time. So I've been on a whole nother planet for a while, but we are coming back to the F1, especially as it's a new sport to cover on this podcast channel. If you are not subscribed, please do so. It's called Betting the Pitch on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or at the real_G Warner is my channel on YouTube. We will be also posting our best bets on the YouTube Shorts and the Instagram Reel platforms. You can find that at the real_G Warner. Same for YouTube and at the real_G Warner on Instagram. But let's start with the Australian Grand Prix. That's the race we first covered on our first inaugural F1 episode, as well as doing some off-season and kind of, I guess, introductory stuff to what we plan on doing for this season of F1. So it was a wet race. That was kind of the expectation. As you said, you thought anything could happen. The results in terms of order, we had Lando Norris finishing first. It looks like about 1 second later or so was Max Verstappen. He was my pick to win. Unfortunately, did not get all the way to the checkered flag. Then we have Russell, Antonelli, and Albon as the next, I guess, in the top five. Your pick was Oscar Piastri, who I know we can get to his performance in the next race in a second. But what did you think about his finish of ninth place in that first Australian Grand Prix?
Yeah. I think it would, I mean, for one, Australia Grand Prix, if anyone watched, there was so many restarts because of crash, because of rain, and because everything. But Oscar Piastri had the winning car, and he did have a chance potentially gonna overtake Lando Norris. And then the unexpected rain came, right? And that's kind of the beauty of the sports is like anything can happen based on the weather or based on a pigeon on the track. Uh, or like you could have a situation like a driver just like missed a millimeter and ran into the a barrier, right? So, but I
Sure.
do think Oscar has a winning car. It was unfortunate he missed a home race. But I'm glad to say he came back, like in the Chinese Grand Prix.
So we'll get to the Chinese Grand Prix in just 1 second. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
takeaways from, so to me, just as newer to the F1 space, of course, than Angel, who
Hmm.
I hear is dominant in the fantasy sports realm, specifically with F1. When I hear and I see, I mean, my pick coming in second place, finishing less than a second later. That seems like very, very close. But I'm probably thinking it's probably not as close as it looks. And then honestly, and something we touched on in our first episode was that there are a lot of changes that we'll be going through in terms of what the cars will be able, I guess, to be modified into. But those are starting next season in 2026. Is that right?
That's correct. That's more of a broader F1 regulations.
Got it. And so we are locked into our into these vehicles and kind of how they've been built for now until midway through the season. Is that right?
Yeah, you can still, I think you have to kind of observe where your car is in the pack, right? You had the testing sort of in before the season starts to get a feel, but then nothing is really in comparison because a lot of constructors could sandbag in the testing stage. But now when everyone is on the track, you can start getting a feel where exactly you are standing among the packs. I think you're gonna probably start seeing upgrades and new parts gonna be introduced probably in after the fourth or fifth race. After I guess we have Japan, Bahrain, and Saudi.
Yeah.
So probably in Miami, you're gonna see some upgrades coming.
Okay. Because these aren't things you can probably change overnight, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah,
Okay, so
yeah.
let's then skip to the Chinese GP. So unfortunately, I did not have enough time on my schedule to get us an episode. But Oscar Piastri, who was Angel's pick, or Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter, if you're looking for increasing her follower count, which I'm definitely all about. Though can't even imagine what it's going to look like when it hits your timeline. But Piastri was the winner in Shanghai. And it looks like Lando finished second, followed by Russell, Verstappen, Leclerc, and Lewis Hamilton, who is the inspiration for Angel's Twitter account. What was your take on Shanghai and the results there? I'd like to hear that first, and then I'd like to hear, and I'll ask you about comparing that to Australia.
Yeah, I think Shanghai, you start seeing the teams like I guess capability in actually more accurate fashion because it's for one, the Shanghai Grand Prix track is actually a pretty um unique track, right? You have a lot of high speed corner and low speed corner really require a lot of aerodynamics from the car from an engineering perspective, and also tire degradation is pretty high in the Shanghai Grand Prix, right? Meaning like really require the driver to manage your tires
In other
throughout
words,
the
the
race.
tread on the tires will run or will be worn
Sure.
more quickly on the sprint
Yeah.
race, which Shanghai was one of those. There are
Yep.
multiple sprint race locations, which to me, as a newbie to the F1 space, it feels like there are true, I guess, Formula One races and then sprint races, which are. Could you explain how the points work from the sprint races, the six of those versus the 24 Grand Prix?
Yeah, the sprint race, I think that this year, so you still the driver in terms of the whole season championship ranking, right? You still get points from the sprint race more in a minor less than the actual race. Um I find sprint race interesting. Like honestly, they introduced in 2022, I think, or 2023, I can't remember exactly, but I'm honestly not a big fan of sprint race because you kind of give away the excitement of the whole race because you can see, oh, I zoom in on the sprint race to kind of get a picture or feel of what's gonna happen on the actual race. Granted, Shanghai Grand Prix actually had a very different results compared to the sprint race versus the actual Grand Prix. But yeah, in terms of points, you still get points. You got like I think a top eight driver getting points instead of all top 10 driver from the actual race day. And the points is a lot smaller in scale compared to the race day, right?
Okay, so then I might be completely misunderstanding this, which good podcasting by yours truly. But so in other words, there's a sprint race and then there's a Grand Prix immediately following that on the next day or so. So
Yeah.
So it's almost like a double race, is what it sounds like to me.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like your race strategy going into a spring racetrack is definitely different from like the regular racetrack because you gotta consider you only have one free practice, right, going into the race, meaning like you really only have that one free practice to get familiar with the racetrack and the condition, everything.
Similar
That
to like
doesn't,
a practice round in golf where you get, I think,
yeah.
multiple practice days if you're playing at the Masters coming up in a couple weekends, for example.
Yeah, and in a regular race, you get three times, right? So
Okay.
that's quite different. And also that the tire strategy is different. So whatever you use, and yeah, tire strategy is different for the sprint race weekend versus a regular race weekend because you can only use certain number of tire per week.
Okay.
And then your there's it's this one is gonna be applicable to the Shanghai Grand Prix because there's also a requirement you can't really change your car as your race starts. And for each race, you measure the car in terms of weights and also like the plank at the bottom of car. Like there's certain like uh, I guess heights you
Rules?
need
Okay.
to
Okay.
yeah like rules and the heights you need to meet. Um, and because any car, if you can lose any ounces of weight, it's gonna give you the speed benefits, right? So they have to like measure it in equally in terms of the weights, in terms of the heights of the bottom of the plank.
And
Um,
when there's, I guess, of course, there are a million rules on how you can
yeah,
race, but also on how
yeah,
you can build the car. Um,
yeah.
in terms of like, I'm sure there are modifications. I know from NASCAR races here in the United States that there's been like, I think someone had won a race and then failed an inspection afterwards. Does that type of culture exist in F1? And if so, I imagine everyone's trying to get the lightest car possible for the most speed. But is that the is are there limitations for how you can modify the vehicle for each week based on kind of what it looked like the week before, or are they just overall modification rules or just rules in general?
So there's a park farm, right? Meaning like by certain time, you cannot make any change on the car going into the race weekend. Typically it's a Friday, or the before the qualification. Because of the sprint race, your sprint qualification start after one practice and that lock down your entire week, right? And so sprint race starts as early like free practice Friday and sprint quali on Friday. So that locks you down. In some other cases, your qualification starts on Saturday. So you have one more day. But what's different on that case is your sprint race, you running your car a lot more than the regular race, meaning you wear off your plank, the bottom of the car, and so sometimes you got to do your calculation and think about like, you know, for this much of a running, for the entire week, am I gonna wear this off to meet the minimum regulation, right? And that's exactly what happened to Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc on Sunday,
Hmm.
is they actually got disqualified because
Okay.
they didn't meet that. Um,
Because
and
I see
that's
them
just
finishing fifth and sixth, but getting no points. So hence a disqualification. So they had
yeah.
some sort of failure after the race that essentially invalidated and removed their points.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a little bit disappointing. Well, for one, I guess I'm a Ferrari fan now because Hamilton is there. So,
So let me ask you
like,
this. So I understand it from your perspective. You just kind of alluded to it, but in the industry, how is that viewed? Is it like, oh, that happens? Or I imagine in such a highly competitive where every point matters, is that something that will like get jobs lost or will put a engineering team lead or something like that in hot water that potentially they might not be around for too long?
well, I don't necessarily think so. I think obviously, people make mistake, right? I think um you can see like the team culture a lot of times comes very important, like especially you're in such a high pressure, like every like millisecond counts, right? So I think that culture aspect, if you have introduced too much of a movement to the team, it's not as favored, right? And we can
Sure.
see kind of historically some team had like changed the personnel so much, and that didn't really help, like Alpine last year. But that being said, like I think Ferrari last week, I thought what was kind of interesting is in the sprint race, Hamilton won the sprint race, right? Meaning they actually have a solid chance. Like the car could work, in comparison of McLaren. But then when you on the race day completely change. And I think that is kind of indicating certain team just runs different strategy, like in the sprint race versus actual race.
Okay, so what I've noticed since they're both Ferrari drivers, then that seems like a the same modification was made on both of the Ferrari vehicles and it did not work or it did not pass inspection. Do you have more information on that? I'm not asking you, Roscoe Poop Scoop, to break any
Yeah.
scoops, but if you have an inside scoop, it would be very useful and very relevant to your Twitter handle and what just happened. So, how do you see, I guess, that disqualification? Can you explain it for those of us that might not have seen it or understood it? Why were they disqualified?
Yeah, so I think their disqualification is a little bit different. Hamilton's is actually the plank that I was talking about. The
Sure.
bottom of the car, you basically have a metal plank, like at bottom of car to protect everything. And he wear that off. High speed corner and their tire degradation, the rough track, right? Like gonna wear off the bottom of cars too. Um, but it just I think they kind of under calculate how much that will wear off. Um,
And so
I think,
the wear basically made it so there was not enough on the vehicle, which then it did not pass that inspection, is what you're saying.
mm-hmm,
So that was a
correct.
risk and likely a miscalculation. How do you
Yeah.
think that impacts? Because we did discuss the potential for winning and for full season, the drivers' championship winner. We did have Lewis Hamilton at about 15.5% implied probability, fourth most likely to win. Does this disqualification pretty much end his season and his chances at winning?
I don't think so. I think it's a long season, right? They have a rough start, to be honest. Like Ferrari, like in I think Australia GP, they didn't do well either. And then coming to Chinese Grand Prix, they won the sprint race, and but then they failed the inspection.
Right.
I don't think that like looking out throughout the whole season, it shouldn't impact much. I do think the little bit misfortune with that aspect is like we're now in going into the third week or third race of the season. I still don't really have a clear finger point on where Ferrari truly standing in the pack, right? Because typically by now you kind of get a feel, even among the middle fields, right? Like Alpine, William, like you start getting a feel where they're standing in the pack, but not as much so for Ferrari because in testing they performed really well in Bahrain, which I'm hoping like next week is Bahrain, right?
Yep.
Potentially that would be beneficial for them or favor for them. But still, I just feel like I haven't really got a chance to truly observe where Ferrari is in the pack, just given the two misfortune.
Got it. I mean, and that makes sense because we saw Lewis Hamilton only collect 1 point in Australia with his 10th place finish. Looks like looking for Leclerc as well, and he finished in eighth. So that was only 3 points ahead. So both of them getting
Yeah.
stripped of their points in Shanghai basically means that they are in they're certainly behind the eight ball as we saw Lando Norris collect 25 in the first race and 18 in the second. So he's on 43, 39 points ahead of the highest Ferrari member. So that I think means something in terms of now I think it's relevant to discuss the Japanese race, though I'm still not fully ready to leave those first two races behind. But just to give an idea for the team probability to win these races, we have Ferrari third most likely behind Red Bull. Do you think that's a result? McLaren being the significant favorite, implied probability at nearly 72% minus 250 if you're looking at American odds. Red Bull plus 450, Ferrari 5-1 odds. Do you think that that is kind of a statement or a result of Ferrari being disqualified in the previous race that Red Bull has jumped them, or do you think that is just how everything was expected because Max Verstappen is such a great racer?
Yeah, I do think it's probably more due to the first two races, right? Like a Ferrari dropped. But honestly, I still have a higher hope in Ferrari in that constructor championship as compared to Red Bull. Um like for one, we're looking at the constructorship in terms of the two drivers,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
In Red Bull, maybe this is a like kind of like share a breaking news, which is not so breaking if everyone follows F1 is they swapped their second driver like just after two races. And that's a lot of talking about team culture, talking about stability in your resource that actually introduce a lot of unknown, right? Elements to the team and to the constructor championship points.
Okay, and the constructor championship is the both drivers are collecting points for that race. So it's essentially the two and how they finish, whichever two drivers I guess are in the vehicle. And from I guess in terms of the Japanese line that I'm discussing, that's really just which team will win the race. So that makes sense that Verstappen probably wouldn't impact that too much because he's still the far and away number one driver at Red Bull. It's just interesting to me because when you look pretty much neck and neck, McLaren and Ferrari at the start of the season, now there's a pretty significant gap between McLaren and Ferrari, and I think that probably reflects the results so far this season. So before we get a little bit deeper in the Japan race, I do have some comments from some listeners that we'll cover later in the show. Please send those through at the real underscore G Warner across all social media platforms. Twitter probably the best place to do it, but if you're a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/real underscore G Warner, that's a great place to message me as well. I do want to ask, I guess, just based on how our first episode went, and it seemed like you were very bullish on Oscar Piastri. He then wins the Chinese GP. Just in terms of those two races that are now finished, what I guess has anything changed in your mind about your expectations for this season, maybe for Oscar Piastri or the rest of the racers?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so. I think honestly between the two McLaren drivers, they should have an equal chance, and the money line says otherwise, right? So which kind of like shows a little bit the fact that Oscar Piastri might be undervalued in this case, and we you have value to extract from that.
Well, stick around and we'll get to those picks coming end of show as a best bet portion. Of course, we'll be chopping a 1 minute video, or I will be, and placing it on Instagram so everyone can see exactly where we're going. But I will run through some of the notable names and now for this Japanese Grand Prix. Lando Norris, the favorite yet again, plus 150 odds, so 40% implied probability. Second is his teammate Oscar Piastri, only at plus 215, which when I compared to the Australia numbers, despite Piastri in his home race, they were very, very different with Lando Norris plus 170, Oscar Piastri plus 675, a difference of about 25%. Now fast forward a couple races to Japan, and they're within 10% of each other most likely to win. Have you seen and you were hot on this when we started. I need to give credit where credit is due at Roscoe Poop Scoop on Twitter, Roscoe. Poop, you probably know how to spell. Scoop, you know how to spell as well. Roscoe Poop Scoop. I'm curious if I'm from what it just sounded like. It sounded like Angel, you're considering these drivers almost equal. Is that too much, or do you think that they're kind of a coin flip of who will finish ahead of each other on the McLaren team?
Yeah, I was literally also just this is well, if you watch the Drive to Survive from last season, which I'm still catching up, but I kind of allude a little bit in the Australia Grand Prix episode is I'm really interested to see how the team managed the two driver this season, right? Last season, you saw a little bit drama on the track between the two driver. Who is a number one? Who is a number one driver? And you have the team principals and the CEO saying we don't have number two driver. Both are number one. But
Mm,
the fact
mm.
is that that's BS. You can't manage a team like that, right? Um,
Well,
so that
in
be
one of
yeah,
the
go ahead.
another episode we do on the Betting Fish Podcast Network, we do an NFL podcast, National Football League, American football here in the United States, and the always statement there is if you don't have a number one quarterback, that's like the biggest problem. I'm curious because there's a little bit difference where there are two race cars in the track at all times. Would you ever suggest that there would be a McLaren team or maybe one of the lower ranking, maybe even Red Bull, that would probably be a higher likely to at least win a race or two this season, but that will favor their number one driver and their second driver will basically play as like a blocker or something like that in that type of case? Is that kind of what we're seeing here, where if there's two number ones, there won't be any sort of team dynamic because they're both competing against each other?
Absolutely. I mean, I think having two driver like team order still comes in on the track. And that's being like, okay, how as a team principal or as a constructor, my ultimate goal is how do I maximize my constructorship championship while I'm helping my driver winning the championship,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So you are in the hunt when you are in the hunt of a constructor championship, you are trying to balance the team dynamic so both of them score as much as possible. But when you don't really have a higher chance, you are trying to maximize one of the drivers, right? So, Valtteri Bottas, when he was in Mercedes, he helped Lewis Hamilton so much. When Sergio Perez, I mean, he had his Rebel seat like for as long as last season went, and that was pretty impressive because he didn't perform well, but had he helped Max Verstappen in 2022 so much, winning his first world championship, right? So I think um yeah, in each team, you got to have a number one driver, and when you don't, what happened is 2008 McLaren when Hamilton and Fernando Alonso holding each other up and them hitting each other and just like not benefiting to the team.
Are
So
you saying
that being
when team members are punching each other, that's not great for team chemistry? Is that what you're saying, Angel?
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, is that too obvious?
No,
Um,
they say sometimes, you don't have to like each other. You just have to have the same goal. But it seems
yeah.
really obvious to me that they don't have the same goal if they're both trying to really get what's theirs in each of these races. And I'm very curious to see how that goes coming down the stretch. So I would like to turn to Japan a little bit just to get us kind of some numbers out there, get some ideas. So Lando Norris a favorite plus 150, Oscar Piastri plus 215, Max Verstappen, Red Bulls. Undisputed number one driver, if you will. He's plus 650. George Russell 12 to 1. Charles Leclerc 14 to 1. Lewis Hamilton 14 to 1. I guess we'll go two more. Yuki Tsunoda, he's 28 to 1. And Kimi Antonelli, 40 to 1 odds. So, and then it gets to 250 to 1. And those are lottery tickets at that point. You might as well just play the Powerball, I think, if you're picking them to win. I do have a listener question to get through as well, or a few of them. But I'm curious because we're seeing now both of the Ferrari drivers at 14 to 1 odds. Maybe, as we've already discussed, Ferrari at length, I think, on this episode, based on their disqualifications in Shanghai. Do you think that there's I mean, we saw from beginning of the season and our picks from the first race, it really seemed to me like we were pretty interested. You had Piastri, I had Max Verstappen, and that those were to me like you were picking a value pick on probably the best team in McLaren. I was just going with the undisputed number one for Red Bull. Do you think that this I guess, could you give us an idea, a little bit of background on what you expect from this race in Japan and how it's different from, of course, we're recording this Wednesday night, so we're a few days out. We might not know it's going to be a wet race, but just could you give us some insight into what you're expecting from Japan this weekend?
Yeah, so Japan, I think maybe in comparison with the Chinese Grand Prix, right? That track, like I mentioned, it's higher degradation and high speed, low speed corners. So, but then what's really benefiting and exciting to see on the Chinese Grand Prix was overtakes because the track design with a lot of long speed, like a long straight lines, right?
Okay.
So in those DRS sort of long straight line, you're gonna see a lot of overtakes. But what's different for Japanese Grand Prix is it's a lot of high speed corners. And it's one of the very classic racetrack for F1 actually, because it's designed to truly test a driver, a F1 driver, how you drive a high speed car through the high speed corner. And any tilting when you get into the high speed corner, being like a three over 300 km per hour, like you're gonna like probably running into the wall or like the barrier. Um, and so I think two things to highlight on that track is um, it's gonna be really hard to overtake because all the different corners in high speed
So
corners.
less
And
passing,
second,
which means wherever you qualify, much more important.
exactly. The second point is it's a track truly test the driver's ability. Like certain track you're gonna have like the best car gonna win the race. Certain track you're gonna get like a yeah like the just truly testing the driver's ability. And the Japanese Grand Prix track is one of them. I think the Spa is also one another. But yeah, Japanese. I think that's kind of the two things to watch out. Like um
Qualifying is important,
qualif
and it sounds like driver
qualifying.
ability. Okay, and so
Yeah,
as we're
exactly.
coming up towards the end of the show, I want to also mention so Japan's the team race winner. We have McLaren minus 250, Red Bull plus 450, Red Bull 5 to 1, Mercedes 8.5 to 1 plus 850, all the way to Williams at 80 to 1. And we will get into our best bets in just a second, but I wanted to go over one of my longtime subscribers, Joe Dollar, came in with a couple things he's looking at for Japan GP, and I'd love Angel you to kind of riff on them just quickly if any of these make some sense to you. So he likes Max Verstappen should never be over plus 250, and of course we have a plus 650 available. He thinks Max on the pole should be something to look for. Max top three, so clearly we have a bullish Joe Dollar on Max Verstappen. He also had Russell plus 275 finishing top three. Yuki on the pole at 80 to 1. Yuki top three, and also a classified under 17 and a half at plus 225. Any of those interest you a little bit?
Yeah, I do think I guess Max the odds for Max to win is not that high, right? That's a point. Like plus two six
Plus 650 to
six
win.
fifty.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
they're saying 13% chance.
Um yeah, so I think that there's value there. Right, and I agree with him. Max has won the Japanese Grand Prix in the past 3 years, and it's kind of his track, like and Red Bull has dominated like this. They still use a Honda engine, which is like I mean a Japanese provider.
Japanese.
So
Yep. Yep.
um all that said, I do agree with him. Like there's value in Max. Like
Okay.
where he's standing.
Okay, so our plan is to be with you now that March Madness has come and gone. Unfortunately, sad story for me, but we got that next year, and I'll be going to the Final Four in San Antonio this weekend. But we will be trying to get with you each week for each episode for each race coming down the line. At Roscoe Poop Scoop, ROSCOE Poop Scoop, who would you like to pick? What is your best bet for this Japanese Grand Prix?
Oh, okay. It's a hard one because I'm like so debating between Max and the Oscar PS3. Like I have said, like McLaren has the best car, and between Lando and the Oscar, and the Oscar just has value to uncover there. And Max, like you just mentioned, like I agree with your friend, is he's just a little bit surprising to see like a plus 650, right? But I think from a pure value standpoint, um, Max would be my pick. Um,
Okay, there we
though
go.
I would add the caviar. Sorry, I would add the caviar. Because like you mentioned, we're recording this on Wednesday, trying to give you guys a little bit more like sort of a leeway to think about this. Um, but if you are following a little bit closer, I would say watch the free practice on like I guess Thursday evening and going into Friday, to get feel where truly Red Bull is standing because I don't think they have the best car. And the max value and where he's standing is truly his own ability, which is what this track is known for.
Well, at
Um,
that point, I'm gonna have to cut you off because we're about to run out of time. Thank you so much, Roscoe Poopscoop, for coming in. I will join you on Max as our pick to win this race, the Japanese GP. Thanks so much. Of course, hit the follow button, Roscoe ROSCOE Poopscoop on Twitter at @the real_G Warner if you want more F1 content the rest of this season.